I'm the moderator of the last panel today. My name is Robert Kopic. I'm basically responsible that you're all here today, so I made you come here. And Mr. Moisa, who's sitting next to me, is our current host for tonight, or for the last panel today. Thanks for that, by the way. Sorry, is this working? And so that's the panel on mobility. I briefly want to introduce our panel to you, so you get an idea of who you're facing here before we kick this off. So I'm just starting with the man to the left to make this very simple for you visually. Kurt Nemec is the Director General of the European Forum for Mobility, Digital and Economic Transformation. Next to him is our host, Mr. Sorin Moisa. He's member of this house for quite some time already. He's the member of the International Trade Committee and a known expert on blockchain in this house from Romania. Next to him is Tomasz, I'm really sorry if I pronounced this wrong, Kochirta. He's the CEO and founder of Mobotic. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay, great. Next to Thomas is sitting Klaus Schaaf. He's the director for DLT at the Volkswagen Group, which I think everybody knows. It's a small company in Germany. Then next to him is Arwen Smit. She's a mobility fellow at the Mobi Foundation. Thanks for coming, Simon, by the way. Then we have Isabelle Vandoorne. She's the Deputy Head of Unit for Sustainable and Intelligent Transport at the European Commission, DG Move. And last but not least, our latecomer, Simon Schwerin. He's the co-founder of the Xane Foundation, which is working on mobility solutions in the blockchain space. And as it's custom today, we give the first word to our host. Please, Sorin, start.
Yes, thank you, Robert. Speaking of organizing things, I would also like to thank my team who has worked very hard to put this event together. Actually, today we had two events. At least I had to participate in two conferences. I've just come back from the Commission speaking on trade issues. And I would like to spare you the usual boring introduction by politicians and try to tell you why I was eventually persuaded and even fascinated by the end of it to host this panel. I had become quite accustomed to blockchain issues, but mobility was one of the issues I had never really thought of much before, let's say, last month. And I realized how wrong I was, because there is quite a bit in terms of the promise for a blockchain for mobility. And this is one of the issues we will obviously be discussing today. And I'd like to touch briefly on some of the things that I find fascinating and interesting. And then, of course, there's the issue which is more maybe directly concerning some of you, of the in-vehicle data and who masters that data and to what extent we do make important decisions in Brussels in order to address that one way or another. So a few words on the promise of blockchain. I think together with AI, obviously, 5G and IoT technology, there are a number of things that could truly change the world as we know it. Blockchain can provide for solutions for instantaneous vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-object communication and coordination, which is crucial for the ultimate success of the autonomous vehicle. And also, I have discovered recently a project on autonomous drones, a project from Australia, which essentially puts together turnkey ecosystems. And there is another one in Austria, and I have drone projects still to discover, obviously. But they create ecosystems fully reliant on blockchains, which allow for instant communication and coordination between drones, as will be the case for vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-object communication. On security, blockchain systems are comparatively very secure compared to other IT systems. Wallets may be broken, but no major blockchain has been attacked and rolled back, to the best of my knowledge so far. So in terms of the solidity, solidity, that's a funny word in this context, given the Ethereum language. The immutability of blockchains provides a type of security that I think is extremely important in this very sensitive area where human life and many other social and economic stakes are at stake. There's the guaranteed traceability from spare parts to full vehicles in relation to everything, service stations, insurance that can help streamline the value chain of the industry, reducing friction and the need for resource consuming reconciliation processes. Digital identities for vehicles and e-wallets attached to them that will allow vehicle-to-object transactions. So new economic models may emerge and will emerge for sure. And of course, there's the ultimate dream or nightmare, I don't know, of self-owned cars, which at least as an intellectual milestone, it is interesting. And I would like to thank Thomas for having sent me some literature on that, among others as well, which has educated me a lot. So this would be about the promise in general, blockchain for mobility. On the issue of in-vehicle data, who should control the data and what will legislation say about it? I guess this is of more direct interest for many of you. Obviously, there is this tension, and we should call a spade, between vehicle manufacturers or OEMs on the one hand, and other actors on this market, such as technology and AI startups, which may like to use that data in order to train their learners and offer maybe services which could be innovative. But also car rental or leasing companies, insurance companies. So we have this debate and this tension on who and in what shape and form should be able to use this data and who should be able to monetize it. It's not an easy question. I've been thinking a lot about it these days, at least. Innovation can be stalled if data is kept in silos on the one hand, and you have few monopolies who have most of the data. But it also is not fair to free ride on other people's efforts and investments, perhaps. I mean, we have this never-ending discussion, for instance, with intellectual property rights for medicine, generics versus research-based medicine and patents. So it's always a painstaking effort to find the right balance. And I would like to offer a potential idea, a solution, which is not mine. Actually, I have discovered it in a Foreign Affairs article dedicated to World Web, to the internet wars of this generation, back in September. I would call it data unbundling. I use this. I have done quite a bit of work on energy and infrastructure in energy, and you may know that we have eventually come to force our energy companies to unbundle, to treat in a distinct way their infrastructures from the other economic assets that they have, and to allow free access to all actors based on pay, on fees, based on the market, to that infrastructure. So if I have a gas or oil pipeline, I'm supposed to, in Europe at least, in the name of competition, to allow other actors to access my own infrastructure. And of course, they would need to pay and afford to pay for it. But this way, I cannot squeeze them out of the market because I control the infrastructure. Data unbundling may be something that we could think of for the long-term future, given the fact that we have a few large companies, and perhaps in new sectors there will be other few large companies in the automotive sector as well, which will gather huge amounts of data. I guess if you look at what happened in the past decade, especially in the United States, a lot of data has been gathered by the state and also by the large companies there. That's okay, but probably it would be fair if this data were to be made available for a price, for a market-based price, in an anonymized fashion to other entities, small or large, on the market. And this way, everybody can benefit from this progress. Not only the pioneers. There may be the honest pioneers who have invented an autonomous vehicle and they are collecting data on it. But there may have been and this doesn't cover the automotive sector, I'm not sure that some of the data collected by the large companies before the major issues and scandals with Prism and then Facebook, Cambridge Analytica and so on is all the time legitimate by definition. So maybe the right way for let's say the public authorities in a democratic and transparent way and with proper negotiation would be to encourage and maybe force people who have hoarded huge amounts of data to share it with others. Again, on a market basis approach, which would mean also revenue. So you have collected data, you make them available to others. That's also a cash flow for you. Nobody's nationalizing the data. Nobody is abusing power in any way. And it would be interesting to have any feedback from you on this idea, which I'm sort of trying to put on the market, let's say, but it belongs to other people. I've just built on it. I have a question for the Commission, and I conclude with this. On this, I haven't been able to get to the bottom of it. There's this famous delegated act on cooperative intelligent transport systems. On the one hand, in the pipeline, it appears somewhere in the Commission. It would be great if you could give us some details on whether this is happening and when. Or are we rather going to have only a recommendation on connected and automated mobility sometime early next year? There is a public consultation which closes on the 4th of December. Is this likely to inform the recommendation only, or the delegated act? Is the recommendation maybe a way to skirt and abandon the need to make up our mind as the EU on this choice on who controls in-vehicle data? So it would be great if you could give us some idea of what's happening there and what is the role of this public consultation. Is it only for the recommendation? Is it for the delegated act also? When is the delegated act likely to come up to surface from the Commission? Was it just a rumor? Thank you.
Thank you, Sorin. Maybe to just lead over with this question to the European Commission. So please, Isabelle, we're looking forward to hear your opinions about sustainable and intelligent transport.
You have to switch off your. Thank you. I'm not so sure that I will be able to reply to your question because blockchain and the CIT's delegated act, I don't see the direct link so far. So maybe I could start with my, and I was therefore not prepared to answer this question, but I will try to answer it after my intervention. So first of all, I hope that I am not there to talk about connected and automated driving. Otherwise, I am the wrong person because maybe blockchain, the benefit of blockchain is somewhere else. Or at least I would like to look at the bigger picture. And that's what we do in DG Move. So we are not looking at the cars. We are not looking at the data. We are looking at the mobility system. And why? Because we are looking at all the challenges the mobility and the transport sector is facing, and we all know them. Very soon, everybody will be meeting at COP24 in Poland, and we have tried to work on all the activities we could have to have an efficient transport system. So I would like to step back first. So everything we do, we try to do it with that objective in mind, so that we have a safe and clean, sustainable, even socially inclusive mobility system. And blockchain is one of the innovation that have a lot of promises to contribute to this. But we need also to see. When we see this big picture, we also need to see other trends, not only the digitalization and the decarbonization challenge, but we need also to see the shared economy but you have referred to it already, and also the change in behavior. I don't know for you, but I know that my children, who are young adults, are going to go to a demonstration this Sunday for the climate. And not only them, so everybody is trying to, with their smartphone, to have new mobility solution, moving from car ownership. We all know that. But so this is the big picture we have. And it's not only about one delegated regulation. We have also, and you have been discussing that during the whole day, we have banks quite interested in mobility. We have plenty of new mobility service providers with, I don't know if you have seen it, but in Brussels the last 2 weeks, we have now on pedestrian area e-scooter in front of us. So shared mobility is quite huge. So it's not about cars. So I would like to, if you have to retain one statement from me today, is that. We have also platforms. We are in the world of platforms, doing a lot also. So we have a new. I hate this word, but it's quite trendy to use it. We, in the mobility and transport sector, and I guess that my colleague earlier today also referred to it, we have a complex ecosystem with so many stakeholders. And so this complexity, I will come back on that point later on, because all these stakeholders will need to interact with each other. And it's really not easy. Let's use an old-fashioned topic. I had last week, 1 week ago, a meeting on what we call multimodal passenger services, or if you want to use a trendy word, mass mobility as a service. For me, it's the same concept, but with a new label, a new logo on it, so that it's brand new. But we have new players on it. When we discussed that, we discussed about ticketing, we discussed about payment, we discussed about revenue sharing, we discussed about invoice. When you look at it, you see that more and more we'll have plenty of interaction between plenty of companies, big, small, traditional ones, new players. So one of the 2 key words of this conference was fears and trust. And this is the situation of the mobility ecosystem today. So if we want to deliver a clean, safe, marvelous, efficient mobility system, we need something. And blockchain has this potential. Because for many reasons, and I have to admit that I am not an expert at all of blockchain. So don't ask me a specific question on it. I know nearly nothing about it. But what I know is that it will help to work, to record the transaction, to work, and I joined the meeting a bit before, to work on this identity management, to work on these smart contracts. So all this will be needed between all the stakeholders. And we have on the one hand the front runners, and on the other hand we have the traditional players. And I know that there are some use cases on which we are working now on mobility, but we need also, I think, from our side, from the mobility club, we need to, what we see is that we need to raise awareness of the advantage of blockchain, because we are nearly not aware of what it is, what it can provide. We know little. We know little about it. And when I say I represent the mobility community, because we have to understand what it is good for. We need to understand what the issues that blockchain could address. Then another part is that, and we see that for all digitalization stuff, so even the basic stuff, capacity and skills of the public authorities, of the public operators, because blockchain will not come in mobility if public transport operators and public transport authorities will be out of the game. And so they need to understand. What else shall I say? I shall also say that another part of the public sector is also the traffic manager. Last week or 2 weeks before, I was in a meeting with traffic managers. And I see also that for addressing congestion, so not only the link with mobility as a service, but also to improve congestion, blockchain has a lot of potential. But we need to see how we do it. So much more research are needed in the mobility sector to see how we can bring blockchain. That's also the perception I have. Then to come back to your question on the CITS Delegated Act, I think that we are talking about apples and pears. So that's why I don't see the direct link with blockchain, because the CITS Delegated Act are quite about exchanging messages between different vehicles and between vehicles and infrastructure. Then when it will come, so it's not a rumor in the corridors. So we have had our inter-service within the Commission, and if everything goes well, in the coming days, it will be out on the Better Regulation portal. On the recommendation, so because you refer to two items of the communication we had in the third mobility package, and the recommendation is another one, and I agree with you that there is a public consultation on it right now. Our colleagues from DG Connect are working on it, so I don't feel the let's say not the right, but I don't. It would be better that you ask them, my colleagues in DG Connect, what they intend to do with it. Voilà, I hope that you have received some information from my side.
Thanks a lot. Going into the use cases, I would like to start with Arwen Smit from Mobi. She's basically the one that's probably best to address this right now.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you for having me on behalf of Mobi at this event. So I would like to start with stressing the urgency. Like, yes, we're in a complex ecosystem. Yes, right now we're facing many data silos. There are many stakeholders involved. So I would argue that the time to rethink mobility is now. And let me illustrate this by sharing a statistic. So today, approximately 55% of the world's population lives in urban areas. This is a statistic from the United Nations. A proportion that's expected to increase to 68% in 2050. So I strongly believe that distributed ledger technologies have a role to play in making mobility more efficient, more effective, and elevating the strain on the urban areas. So I'm here today to represent Mobi, and Mobi is a non-profit organization working with forward-thinking companies, governments, and NGOs to make mobility services more affordable, greener, safer. And we do that by helping to accelerate the development of blockchain and related distributed ledger technologies. And we see a dire need for open standards. An open ecosystem with competing standards just results in new walled gardens. So this is something that I would advise to avoid. The rapid changes in the automotive and mobility sectors present many problems which may be answered with blockchain and other distributed ledger technologies. We're seeing growth in trading and sharing of high-value assets, such as luxury vehicles, while at the same time, trusted middlemen are being disintermediated. Smart connected vehicles need to balance the need for security and control of data with the market's desire for connectivity and data access. For the first time, OEMs, service providers, and cities are having to collaborate on open standards to provide safe, sustainable services. Mobility is evolving from a walled garden to a web of interconnected relationships. Blockchain-based identities for machines and individuals will be the key puzzle piece to unlock mobility services at scale. Because the line between mobility services blurs, where you can customize virtual identities to to unlock permissions for the required service. Imagine one vehicle that would have different people using it for different purposes at different times of day. This will become the standard and not the exception. Value will flow bilateral, from you and me to autonomous economic agents, such as a parking meter or a vehicle able to dynamically set a price, check conditions, and accept payments. The economy of things only requires an embedded identity and a profit function, which is a lot easier than teaching a car to drive by itself. And this effort lies at the very heart of Mobi. So starting with vehicle identity and history, Mobi's use cases span the entire mobility services value chain. The Mobi Alliance includes over 70% of the world's Tier 1 OEMs, many governments, many universities, and leading startups, some of them sitting on this panel today. So in the words of Christine Lagarde, the managing director of the IMF, there are new and evolving requirements for money, as well as essential public policy objectives. While the case for digital currencies is not universal, we should investigate it further, seriously, carefully, and creatively. I would echo these sentiments for blockchain-based data, identity, and payments in particular. And let me conclude with this. In the Silicon Valley of the early 2010s, the US created an attractive environment for Web 2.0 companies. They could flourish because of the combination of regulation, funding, and talent. Today, Europe faces a unique opportunity. Blockchain and distributed ledger technologies herald a new wave of innovation, and the EU has a decision to make. What role does it want to play on the next technological frontier? What the EU decides to do matters very much. Mobi extends an invitation to work with us, so we might learn from each other and shape this next phase of mobility together.
Apologies. Thank you, Arwen. Maybe going from an initiative to an existing world player with Volkswagen. So please, Klaus, floor is yours.
I can say a lot of things which Arwen already said, but most of the car companies are now changing their business model to a more from car developing and car selling company to a mobility selling company. So we in the future we will be more a mobility company than anything else, and this will be a short time until this reaches the world. So we expect this to be in 2025 to be the case, and that goes together with some other developments. For example, the self-driving cars, which also we will reach some parts of the world, some parts earlier, some parts later, in around this time in 2025, and this is also something I would like to tell the European Commission and the Parliament. Be careful that Europe is not falling behind on that. Currently, most of the companies see the United States and Silicon Valley as the starting point, Asia as the follower, and only then they see Europe as the next place where this will happen. And with all this goes together the tools for offering this mobility, and blockchain technology or distributed ledger technology is a big part of that. And because especially when we have self-driving cars, they cannot sign credit card receipts, and so we need something else which makes it possible that transactions, either financial or just transactions of data, of goods or so, can happen and will be trusted by the people who use these services. And something else, we are working on this on a lot of things already. And this is for electrical cars. We need to charge the cars, and we need to pay for this, and we need to reserve charging spaces. And all this needs a new economy, which is a little bit different than what we have now. You just go to a gas station, but since charging takes a little longer, you don't want to stand in line behind 10 other cars, and so you need to plan this, at least at the moment, much better than before. So this is one of the things we're doing. Another thing which will be an example of blockchain very early, and I know that a lot of companies are already working on that. That is trusted mileage. So we can put the data of the which the cars have taken, the kilometers, onto the blockchain, and thus put out certificates so that used cars will not be will be trusted much more than in at the moment. At the moment, about 10% of all used cars have a wrong mileage reading, and for that reason, this is one thing which will be out very early as a not only a proof of concept, but as a first tryout for how blockchain can work in this market. Something else we have been working on is software over the air. We now have the ability to put new software into the cars, not only to repair existing software, but also to offer new services in the cars. And with this, there comes more danger that the software is tampered with, or that the wrong software is on there, that not the software which should be in the cars is in the car. And this has to be controlled, and blockchain offers a possibility to check if the right software is on the car. So when you go with your car to control, and they can see what kind of software is in there, and you can prove that you always put the newest software into your cars. For this, we also need a mobility ecosystem, and I think Mobi is really an important part of that, because we need a lot of standards so that all these companies can work together with us. Of course, we would like that Volkswagen would be the company of choice for a lot of services, but of course we see that there are some other companies around the world who also want to take this. And so if we go to, let's say, a smart city like Hamburg, Paris, or Brussels, we cannot force them to use our system. We need a way to standardize all these systems so that everybody can use them and offer their ability. And the competition will be in a way who uses or who offers the best usable, the best UX system for these, and the highest number of services. So we will not put our services into a silo, so that if you cannot get out of this, but you need to take a lot of different services and combine them. And for that, you need a lot of standardization, a lot of different cooperations, and especially also in the field of the different ledgers. We have Ethereum, we have Quorum, we have IOTA, and they all somehow have to work together, because a lot of services will be on different chains. During a hackathon in the summer in Munich, we tried this out, and we combined the IOTA Tangle with an Ethereum blockchain because Ethereum was offering smart contracts, which IOTA couldn't do at the time. And there's a lot of things. Each ledger has their advantages and disadvantages. And if we combine them and put them together, and we can develop completely new systems which are based on IoT, on new ideas of contracts, and a lot of new services. And I hope that we get help for that from the European Parliament, from the European Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Going from a big player to very engaged entrepreneurs, I would say Thomas, could you maybe start and then we go to Simon right after that? Sorry.
Yes. Hello. So I am the founder of a startup, started in Romania, will continue in France because I have the double nationality. And I would like to place our concept in a larger context and speaking about the autonomy of machine in general. So not only autonomous cars, but autonomous machine tools, which will help us achieve a dream, which is to be autonomous as an individual. That means being able to work from home, 3D printing our house, put some solar panels on it, being independent energetically. Where they have washing machines, we'll have robots in the kitchen, cleaning the floor. And I claim that those machines are not autonomous enough, so they still need us to configure. They cannot make transactions yet. So the blockchain is the perfect tool to render those machines autonomous. And again, this will help us become autonomous as individuals. So blockchain is about decentralization. I would say blockchain is about autonomism. So we are placing our startup in this context of trying to be autonomous. This is why we are trying to decentralize everything, starting with the manufacturing. So we are trying to build fab cells hosted in container, in shipping container, so we can send them fast. We are building a very, very small autonomous vehicle. And I insist on small because I don't think that the solution is cars built by our friends from Volkswagen. We are more closer to a bicycle than to a car, but we put a cabin on it, so we have the safety and the comfort of a car, but with the agility and nimbleness of a bicycle. And we should watch carefully cities like Amsterdam or Copenhagen, who solved part of the traffic problems with bicycles. So again, we see the blockchain as the perfect tool, and we see it as a missing link. It's a technology we didn't have before, so now we should use it fully, and not only in some fields. So this is why we are trying to use it in all the fields of our business, starting, of course, with the funding. So we are going to issue tokens in 6 months when the regulations will be a little more clear. So by definition, we are going to have a tokenized economy in the startup. Then we are going to use those tokens to attract talent, and we are going to try to build a meritocracy. So the engineering and the design of the vehicles and manufacturing cells are going to be done in a community of peers, so peer-to-peer. The blockchain will help us, of course, align the interests of every peer, then balance the contribution, each value added with the right retribution. As I said, we hope to attract global talent. Let's say engineers who are trying to work from passion instead of working for a salary. So they will keep jobs in Audi and hopefully come to us. Then the manufacturing, as I said, it has to be distributed locally. So we'll try to create jobs locally. The actual technologies, additive manufacturing, it's allowing us to do this. But I think those fab cells, those manufacturing cells, have to be part of a network of autonomous machines. So exactly like the vehicles who are going to be able to bid for rides, for services, and ask for maintenance or ask for swapping and charging batteries. The machine tools fabricating those vehicles have to be autonomous also, so ask for bid for raw material and take money in their wallet out of delivery of parts. So, of course, blockchain is mandatory in this architecture. When we are operating fleets of cars, again, the best tool we found is blockchain. So I insist on the fact that we are not coming from the blockchain. We are not coming from the software field. We are building hardware, but we found in 2012 the blockchain, and then we realized that this is the perfect tool. From the operating point of view, what we are doing is decentralizing Uber, because everything Uber is doing, it's doable with the blockchain. So we can automate everything without taking the 30% they are taking. I think you heard about the cases of paying the parking or paying the swapping of the battery, the charging of the battery, thanks to the blockchain. And of course, then you have the user. And in our philosophy, the user can be the designer or the manufacturer or the operator. And this is a principle called prosumption. So we are mixing supply and demand in the same ecosystem. In order to do this, we started and we built the prototypes of the manufacturing cell, and we already have 2 prototypes of a vehicle. We are building the 3rd, and the project is to obtain enough funding to to manufacture, build, and operate a fleet of 4,000 vehicles in Paris. So again, I insist on the fact that the right vehicle for the urban areas is an individual, very small vehicle, some kind of a chair on 3 wheels, autonomous, of course. So we are preparing this deployment of 4,000 vehicles. We are supported by the Paris Town Hall. So with those 4,000 vehicles, we are trying to make a proof of concept of the whole ecosystem, not only the vehicles or the manufacturing, all the operations, all the functioning, all the concepts. We are trying to prove them to the world and scale very quickly only by giving the example and sending the software we developed to entrepreneurs around the world. Again, we already started. Hope we'll succeed. Thank you.
I think I'm going to just start with a very general observation I made today, just to give a bit of food for thought, and then tell a bit about where we come from, what we're kind of thinking, and then I have a few concrete questions and perhaps propositions for the European Parliament as well. So I don't know, like I have made the weird observation this morning when I flew in from Berlin, where we are from, that I went to the taxi line, and basically there was like, I think 150 people waiting for taxis, and guess what? They probably took around 150 different taxis, right? So why couldn't they just basically move into a fifth of that, right? Why isn't there sufficient sharing infrastructure for those simple cases already in place? Why can't we enforce those better? I think that's really a first step with regards to sharing economies. So what do we do at Zain? So we have been founded a few years ago after a 3-year research project from the Oxford University. We are 30 people now, so we are maturing, I guess, as a company a little bit. And we have always been looking at the intersection between blockchain, data privacy, how do those interrelate with the other cutting-edge technologies mentioned before, like AI, like big data. What does it mean when we can bring trust back to data, when you can then use that data for AI, or when you can trust your shared use cases? We are ourselves focusing a lot on creating a new kind of computer language. It's really deep technical stuff where I'm not going to go into too much detail, otherwise I'll lose all of you. So what we're doing is essentially just trying to create a standard or a standard computer grammar for granting access to specific data points, to specific devices. So we're essentially trying to turn around a paradigm in which basically a centralized entity defines the rules in which you can move in, by turning it around and saying, okay, you yourself can define your own rules by which I want to move in this digital world and in the sharing economy. So we are really focusing on shared use cases, on mobility. We have done successful use cases with Porsche, Daimler, Mercedes, these kind of company, but also looking at mobility in a broader space. We have also built a drone use case, but we think that's far from going anywhere because of the regulation in the airspace. We're looking a lot into trains, and I think that's a really valid use case. I think there should be a lot done to make people use trains more frequently, also across the EU. I think there's a lot of potential for making those autonomous, for making automated booking or billing systems. For example, we have worked with, just to give a small example of the complexity, with Deutsche Bahn, and they have 1,500 sub-companies, sub-GmbHs that manage all kind of different track systems and so on. So, I mean, it's an insanely complex system. So if you think about it, it's still almost everything is manual work, which you couldn't even believe. So I think where I want to get to is essentially trying to look at the bigger picture. So as you were asking, what does blockchain do? How does it help us? I think with regards to mobility specifically, it's really crucial to make us as users, me stepping into an autonomous driving car, me using a shared car or shared mobility for public transportation, trusting that, or without even me knowing, trusting that it will take me from A to B. There won't be an accident. There won't be a mess up that maybe hurts me, my family, or my friends. So I think that's essentially what blockchain will do, and then we won't even think about it. I think it's the same as we had with the internet, where no one thinks about TCP/IP and how does it work. I think that's similar to blockchain. I mean, honestly, I didn't prepare that much before, so I'm just trying to pick up every here and there. So I think for us as a startup where we have a lot of things to do, we all work extremely hard. A lot of us, I guess 6 days a week. We really want to make sure that we can move fast enough. And specifically in this innovation space, what we realize or what we joke around with is say, okay, 1 month for us is like a year for the other industries. And I think that's unfortunately the speed that globalization has brought to us. So to give you an example in that case, so we have looked a lot on how to work with European OEMs, with old paradigms, with old thinking. But in the end, we realized, okay, to really do anything fast enough in order to keep up, we are now talking to companies from China, for example. To give you an example there, we are working there with a company who started putting charging stations for e-scooters into China. In the last whole year, they installed 800,000 charging stations. And you can try to think about how many of those are in just Germany or the EU. It's nothing compared to it. The kind of speed they can put on the table is just very different. And why is that? Because, as you all know, you go through the government first in China. If you want to do anything, you convince the government first. And I think maybe we can take that as an analogy to say, okay, how can we work with the EU? And so I'm already going to come to the EU point. For us, we would love to work with the EU. For us in the blockchain space or in that innovation space, I don't think, or I guess many of the people like us, we have the primitive, the thinking of the globalized people in my generation. So we don't see each other as competitors anymore. We try to achieve something together. The challenge is we don't know how to do it because we don't see concrete initiatives or we don't find them. We don't know where to act in. So what we would like to see or we would like to do, we would like to work, I guess, in some kind of EU sandbox or some kind of thing that enables us to build EU-wide use cases in a high speed to play around with that without too many regulatory hurdles. I don't know how many of you have tried to fill out an application for EU funding or an EU project. It's a lot of fun. It takes you a long time. And usually, if you don't have the strongest player in the whole market and the strongest universities, then you probably won't achieve it. So the question is there a possibility for us to build these kind of things for you? And here's a surprising point. In that industry, we probably do it for free. We probably don't ask for anything. We won't even ask for funding. We just want to get a chance to do it. And I think that's a really crucial point that this blockchain world brings with it, because most of those companies are well funded. Globalization brings them money from China, from US, from crowdfunding. So I think that's not the challenge. The challenge is more like getting the opportunity to actually just do it. I mean, because I think only then we can really be fast. I think we have to take a really pragmatic approach. Otherwise, we can keep sitting in such circles and think about it and talk about it for ages, but we won't get anywhere. And I think that's, from at least our small little perspective, what's going to happen again, most likely, because I think that's the same what happened previously. And yeah, I mean, with having been to China with at least some colleagues of mine last week, you wouldn't believe what you see there and how fast they move and how incredible it is what you see there in terms of scale and speed and how much further developed they are, even with IoT, AI, and blockchain. So yeah, I think that's a very large point for us. A second one is the data unbundling. I think that's a really, really interesting point, and we also look a lot into how to build data marketplaces. And I would be wondering myself, okay, what's the groundwork on the regulatory side that has to be done in order to provide such data marketplaces? I mean, myself, I wrote my thesis on GDPR and blockchain. I talked to Jan-Philipp Albrecht, lots of other commissioners on that topic. It was really interesting to see how the GDPR evolved, and we do everything we can to build our technology by design enabled to be privacy conform and to take those considerations into mind. But what will it take for data marketplaces? What will it take to share these data points and then make them usable to startups, make them usable for training on them? And I think this is what we are probably going to be able to do next year technically. The question is, can we do it regulatory? I mean, in the regulation sense. Otherwise, we will do it in Israel and China and the US, you know, and that's the reality, I think. So I think that's probably the end of my argument.
Thanks a lot, Simon. Last but not least, Kurt, please give us your vision for the European Forum of Mobility and what it tries to achieve.
Yeah. Yes, I'm not only the Director General of the European Mobile Forum, I'm also a lawyer, and as a lawyer, 25 years ago, I wrote a book about the liberalization of infrastructure market and telecommunication, and we had the same discussions 25 years ago. So for you, maybe we have a solution on the regulation. I think it should be based on the regulation on the EU regulation of telecommunication, because that resolved the problem with the access to the data points. It's from US. It's called the Essential Facility Doctrine. It's from 1912. And we have a lot of principles there. In this regulation is a EU regulation, and I think, we should take this regulation and 60%, we can use for these problems we have. Second, you ask if the owner of the data should be a private person or maybe the public. I think it should be the private person, because it's so complicated, to handle this data in the blockchain. It has to be private. It's not possible for a public data holder to hold these data for all these users.
I said on the contrary that we would not, it should not be nationalized, made public in any way. No, of course, data belongs to those who, to private individuals and then to companies who have collected data. But just like my energy infrastructure is mine, but I'm forced to unbundle it, that is to make it treat it as a separate economic or business unit and allow access to others, this is not being confiscated. It's still my pipeline or my whatever infrastructure. This was the point I was making. God forbid, nothing close to making private data public or nationalizing or forcing anyone to do anything excessive. But to create access and a marketplace, a data marketplace, maybe one way out of this conundrum, of this dilemma. Because data, the new oil of the economy and so on. It's just an idea that is worth debating. But again, I was not suggesting we should nationalize in any way.
Sorry, not you. But there's a discussion, within even in Austria, because they want to nationalize, this data, And so my position, so it's not your position. My position is data should be private, but there should be the essential facility doctrine. So is it essential for the public? They have to get access to this data. That's it.
Thank you. Before I start asking questions, is there any questions from the floor before I start torturing our panel? Please go ahead.
So, just a quick question. Would you, maybe for the representatives of the European Parliament and regulators, would you foresee that we are present in the current situation, a competition between regulators across geography, in a way that if you don't do anything, small startups will go elsewhere to do their business. So is there this kind of competitive approach? Do you feel that in your day-to-day job?
Yes, I hear this very often. But it varies across fields, but generally from innovative startups, from companies everywhere in the blockchain space, in the AI space. We do hear this quite often, that if we do not come up with intelligent soft regulation, then they are likely to go to other jurisdictions. And I know cases when companies have moved to either Singapore, But I know cases where the opposite was true. They moved back into Europe from Singapore or the US. I mean, it varies. I mean, on a company trying to do an ICO would not likely move to the US because the environment is hostile. But it may be in Switzerland. France is developing an ICO-friendly regime, or seems to, or we hope it will. So yes, there is regulatory competition. But on the other hand, we do need to look after the general interests of society as well. So we need to find a balance. But I think on blockchain, at least, now the Commission has been quite open-minded and has made quite some inroads, and Parliament as well on for instance, the money laundering regime. Extending it to the blockchain space, I think, was a major achievement. It may seem hostile, but actually, on the contrary, it's aiming to bring some legal predictability and sort of light civilization to this space and make it more respectable, getting rid of the scammers and the things that have gone wrong in this space, allowing it to grow legitimately. So, it's helping clean the space of its bad apples. And this is, I mean, the most important jurisdiction on earth, I think, Europe, has done this, and I think it has done a good job. But on other issues, for instance, on market manipulation or regulating ICOs in a sophisticated, friendly way, that we haven't done as much as we could have. But I know the Commission, DG Connect, is thinking of moving on that as well at least for the end of this mandate, early the next College of Commissioners. But yes, the straight answer to your question is there is regulatory competition, and there are member states in the EU that compete with each other where there's no EU regime. I have Estonia, Malta, but again, it varies with technologies. Now, Finland is quite keen on mobility as well, for instance, and they try to create friendly regimes. But outside Europe too, so we are losing competitiveness and businesses to the world outside Europe. On AI, there's the famous argument that because of GDPR, and I believe there's only partial truth in this, we're lagging behind because other people can collect data much more easily. But if you collect data against your citizens or not respecting their rights, it's not the right thing. I mean, if you create a digital dictatorship, as China does, no, God forbid, I would never try to do that, even risking to lose the AI race. But blockchain may be the solution to that. Maybe people can, have self-sovereign identity and they monetize their data. And this way, they share freely their data rather than data being taken from them. So I think you can have peace between the GDPR and AI eventually. But there is this famous argument that we're lagging behind because we don't have enough data to train our learners, and somehow European culture is less propitious for AI.
Thomas also wanted to respond, so please go ahead.
Yes, so I will try to present you two facts linked to the European part. First, the funding. So the gentleman from Spain, I would tell him that we obtained 1 million euros, and we were just 2 people from Europe. So we obtained 1 million when we are applying for another 2.5 million. So we can still obtain funding. And speaking about regulation, we made a foundation in Switzerland, Zug, 1 year ago. We liquidated, we are making it in France. So those are 2 facts.
You want to add something under this as well? Please go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I think it's very important for you because at the moment, if you see an industrial product, it's not only the product, it's product and the service, or the product, industrial European product as a service. So the value and quality is not anymore the product itself, can be from China, it's just the quality of the services. And blockchain is part of these services. So if we're losing the services and the regulation there, we're losing the quality. So why China or US should buy the European products? And that's really the problem. You cannot sell anymore just an industrial product without any service. It's gone.
Thanks a lot. Anybody else wants to answer from the panel to the question? No? Great. Any other questions? Please go.
I just want to follow up on what Thomas said, that it would was easy for you to get money out of the European Union? Because in my experience, it's more for like what Simon said. It takes like from age 2020 to get the paperwork done and get everything in. It's a nightmare, and people actually just don't just walk away from it just to start worrying about it. And because I know a couple of companies who would like to get involved, but he just said the paperwork and everything needs to get done. It's just too overwhelming to even join. So there's companies who would like to do it through the European Union or help out, but they'd rather just go to the VC or not the ICO anymore, but maybe the STO route going forward, than do with all the paperwork that needs to be done. I don't know if you guys can put any to it, to maybe can shorten it or make it a smart contract or something go forward.
Yes, so we applied for 1 million from Romania with 2 guys. Me and one of my colleagues, and then I applied also for Age 2020, and I made the record on my own alone in 30 days. I was refused, but I'm reapplying this year with help from some consultants in Spain, I think. So what I meant, I don't mean this is very easy, but this is not impossible. And of course, nobody likes the paperwork. I admit it's very complicated, but try to obtain money from VCs. And you'll see it's much more complicated because we did that also. Much more complicated.
Isabelle, please.
I feel obliged to react a bit, even if I am not a funding and financing expert. I have a bit of knowledge that I can share. So maybe there are other ways of receiving funds other than A2020, because you have also the specific activities targeted SMEs, which is another tool to support startups to work. And in the world of smart cities, we have also the EIT, who is also offering some possibilities. Beside that, and beside the EC managed funds, we need also to be aware that the EIB has also some possibilities to offer. I know that, for example, in the city world, there is a facility which is called Elena, which can help to have some feasibility studies to launch a project. So I think that maybe the Commission is not good enough at explaining the different possibilities we have to give money. But that's true that beside that, if you know a good expert in application, it's always easier.
Thank you. If I may ask a question, which personally is of interest to me, because basically, as data was mentioned a lot, and car manufacturers or car producers look more and more into data and becoming service providers. And as you know, the biggest data holders in the world are probably Google and maybe Facebook. Just out of interest, if you look at, as you outlined that, Klaus, that car manufacturers until 2025 want to become service providers, who will be the Googles and the Facebooks in the mobility space in 2025? Will it be Google and Facebook, or will it be somebody else?
My personal hold for that is there will be no other Google or Amazon or Facebook. They are already there. So what we can do as in the mobility sectors and as the OEMs is to build up a wall against these services. So there will not be a Volkswagen and not be a Daimler or a Toyota who will be fighting Google with the data. But we need something where we have some kind of a mobility layer above the internet and between the internet and the platforms which are used by all the mobility providers. And with this, where everybody can contribute and take the data out of it and use them for their mobility system or for their business model. We have a chance to overcome this data. I don't know how to say that, but they own the data. They think they own all the data. But if we work together and we put this together in a layer which everybody can use, then this the standalone by Google will somehow disappear. Because then they don't have the data alone, but we can use them, and we are not dependent on them anymore. And that is, I think, the major thing which we need to discuss over the time. And also, we need to have some new ways to solve problems. Which are in mobility. For example, we have now the cities which are, where some courts say in the near future, when the weather is bad and the climate is bad, then the cars are not allowed to go into the cities anymore. We need to find ways around this. Nobody wants this actually to happen, and but there are ways around this so that we can so that the access to the cities is somehow regulated, but not by the authorities, but by the users themselves. And if we can work something like this out, and I think we could have a chance for this, then we would have a new way of that the people do not look bad at authorities, cities, or European administrations, but it would be more like we are doing this, and I can get advantages out of this, and I can sometimes I need to pay for it because I'm disadvantaged by it, but we have a chance that the borders which Google and Amazon especially set up can be taken down by us if we do it right and if we do it fast.
I would like to introduce a different perspective. So, starting with the data that Google and Apple, amongst others, hold. It's a lot of data, but even this amount of data is by no means enough to get to level 5 autonomy for self-driving cars. There have been many estimates that if you want to get that type of data, that will require cross-industry collaboration to even train those algorithms. Okay, let's assume that it arrives, self-driving cars. I think it will in the end of the day. What you will then see is for mobility services, it will most likely be under the current model a race to the bottom. If you have cars that can drive themselves, it will be increasingly, the uses of the cars will be increasingly commoditized unless there are services around it that would add a new value layer. Now, if you look at what's happening across many OEMs, and Klaus, feel free to react on this, is that if you currently sell a car, let's call it 1X, that is a one-off value creation opportunity. Then that car enters the mobility services ecosystem, and therein it continuously generates value. Now, what I'm seeing is that OEMs don't necessarily all want to become mobility service providers because that is a space that is very attractive to them. They want to share in the benefit of that 7X pool, because who in their right mind wouldn't, right? So I think that trend is currently going in parallel with where the market is going, which is that we don't have a one-to-one relationship anymore, like I own a car. You have one car used by various service providers for various different utilities. And it will become even more complex because this one car or this one vehicle will not just be owned by me, it might be owned by the entirety of these panelists in the simplest sense. So I think the ecosystem will become more and more complex. I think mobility services will become more and more fluid. And I think that one of the most attractive way of technically structuring this would be to bring it back to distributed ledger technologies, because that's definitely a multi-stakeholder collaboration play.
Please.
I think that I like the way you explain it, but I would like to come to the basics. Can someone explain to me why we are focusing on access to data in a room discussing blockchain for mobility? Because I am a bit lost, and if I would have been prepared to discuss about access to data, I love that topic, but why are we talking that in this specific framework of blockchain? If someone can reply to me.
That basically is a simple thing. The last time the colleague of Arwen and I were discussing the use of blockchain, and he gave me a simple example that there's a project where they bring together entrepreneurs or engineers to test self-driving cars and how to use the data and how to steer them. That was basically the starting point. So the data that is connecting those cars and the exchange of this data is being done by blockchain. And that's basically why I was asking about it. So that's as an overarching topic, as simple as that.
Yes, I mean, I concur with that. There are two reasons why I mentioned this. The first one is that I have looked into the briefing that I have received from you, and this is mentioned as an important thing. But when you said it's like apples and pears, it was a bit tough, but I realized you were right. I mean, for instance, it can have an influence on the type of blockchain that you use, for instance. It can be a permissioned blockchain if you have the more restrictive approach to it, or it can be a public permissionless blockchain otherwise, but it might not even be a blockchain. So what you will decide should be, hopefully will be technologically neutral. So it may have an impact on the blockchain solution that is finally adopted if it is a blockchain solution. But you are right, the two issues are not necessarily linked. I mean, they preoccupy this crowd here, but they are not necessarily, one doesn't condition the other. So here you're right.
Sometimes they're not linked, but I think they are linked because the blockchain, in a very abstract way, it's just a medium of circulation. It's a currency or any data, so smart contract, whatever, but you have a technology, and this technology is blockchain or something else. But very abstract, it's just a medium of circulation. And this medium transport a data. It's a value of a currency, it's a smart contract, whatever. So for me, the blockchain, the technical side of the blockchain is permanently linked to any data. Okay, but the funny thing is, in an abstract way, I think, a currency and a smart contract, in the mobility, it's the same. So in the future, we will have not only a currency or a smart contract or whatever, we will combine it. So, for example, you will have in the future a currency, a state currency, for example, for child benefit. Where you can give them money in form of, based on a blockchain, a currency, but you can, in form of a smart contract, say, okay, this money is just for a child 9 to 12. It's just for, I don't know, for a child in the region of France. So the future, combining blockchain, with the abstract ability, of data, and it will be unbelievable. But it's the first step at the moment.
So maybe instead of talking about access to data, we should talk about data sharing and the conditions to share the data. Is it not right?
I think we should discuss the future medium of circulation. That the word is from it's from Copernicus, because he was not only famous for his astronomy, he was only famous for economics, and this expression is from Copernicus. Because before Copernicus we had Aristoteles, the pricing, and then he was the first man who invented the sentence or whatever, or the idea of circulation, the medium of circulation.
So circulation of data.
That's it. So what's the data? It's a currency, it's a value, it's a contract, but in the end, it's just circulation. And that's the highest point of abstraction.
Because I hear quite often access to data, open data, and if we can call a cat, it is easier to progress.
But it's really complicated because the blockchain is just a technical layer.
Thank you.
And then we have the law, and it's another layer. And then you have the economics, then you have competition law. It's really complicated. Sorry.
I'm really sorry to have to bring this to an end, especially now. It got very interesting. Anybody with the last question before we close for today? Anything that you always wanted to ask anybody on the panel? Go ahead. Last question.
Anybody on the panel? If these are going to be mobile and automated, atomic, don't you the roads and everything else needs to be redone with sensors and, it's just a question because if you have it, all these communication between cars and trucks and everything.
There will be some additional communication needed, definitely, but I think this is something which will develop over time, and this is something we can really adjust really easily to. But to come up with a solution for exchange of data, exchange of values, that is something we have to think about from a regulatory aspect. The other one is just technique.
Okay.